Hey everyone, 99% of you watching aren't subscribed. Let's change that. Hit that subscribe button, and at 1,000 subscribers, we'll drop special stories just for you.
The first mistake was laughter. It echoed sharply against the vaulted command dome of the Dominion of Silence, a sound too harsh for a species that prized composure. The Korthan did not laugh often. Their biology made the act unpleasant. Vibrations rattled delicate resonance chambers along their ribs, but General Vierek had allowed it. Because the world turning beneath them seemed absurd. Earth. Blue oceans. White cloud formations. Night-side cities glittering like scattered bioluminescent algae. A civilization broadcasting music, arguments, advertisements, and pet videos into the vacuum of space. Primitive. Vierek stood at the center of the observation chamber, his armored silhouette outlined by holographic tactical projections. Fleet signatures hovered around the planet in disciplined formation. 42 capital vessels, hundreds of escorts, automated interdiction arrays already mapping communication satellites. Confirm atmospheric composition, Vierek ordered. Oxygen dominant. Nitrogen buffer. Industrial pollutants within tolerable margins, replied Science Officer Telvath. Biology compatible for limited Korthan exposure with filtration. Resistance assessment? Fragmented planetary governance. Over 200 sovereign political entities. No unified command. Military technologies pre-gravitic. Nuclear fission primary deterrent. A ripple of subdued amusement moved through the officers. Nuclear fission. The Korthan had abandoned fission before this species had invented written language. Commence Phase 1, Vierek said. The fleet moved. From orbit, it was almost gentle. Null-field satellites deployed first, sleek, crescent devices that hummed into position around Earth's equator. Within seconds, human communications fractured. Civilian satellites blinked out. Military guidance systems desynchronized. GPS grids dissolved into meaningless noise. On Earth, the lights began to flicker. Vierek watched power grids cascade into failure across continents. Electrical substations overloaded as carefully tuned interference harmonics disrupted their frequencies. Cities dimmed, then darkened. The humans reacted predictably. Emergency broadcasts spiked. Military radar lit up in frantic sweeps. Fighter jets scrambled blindly into skies already owned by Korthan drones. Political leaders issued statements, some defiant, some pleading, most confused. Deploy atmospheric suppression craft, Vierek commanded. Silver insertion ships pierced the upper atmosphere without sonic booms, their gravity drives warping air aside rather than tearing through it. They descended toward strategic targets, communications hubs, military bases, major transport arteries. The first human missile battery fired within 9 minutes. The warhead detonated harmlessly against a Korthan kinetic veil, its nuclear payload blooming into a muted sphere of contained radiation that dissipated like mist. They escalate rapidly, Telvath observed. They posture, Vierek corrected. Neutralize without excessive casualties. He meant it. The Korthan Empire did not annihilate viable species unnecessarily. Humanity would be integrated, its labor, its creativity, its biological diversity cataloged and repurposed. Resistance would fade once futility became obvious. Ground reports streamed in. Korthan drones disabled armored divisions by magnetically seizing their engines. Aircraft fell from the sky as flight systems glitched into shutdown. Naval fleets drifted powerless as their electronics died simultaneously. Efficient. Clean. Clinical. Projected surrender timeline? Vierek asked. 72 planetary hours, Telvath replied. Possibly sooner if leadership is directly addressed. Vierek nodded. Then the data began to change. General, a tactical analyst said cautiously, global broadcast volume is declining. Because we are suppressing it. Negative. Suppression fields remain constant. Signal origin is ceasing voluntarily. Vierek's crest plates angled forward. On the projection sphere, the chaotic web of radio and digital chatter that had blanketed Earth thinned, then thinned further. Emergency channels went silent. Civilian networks went dark. Military frequencies stopped hopping. Within 30 minutes, Earth, once deafening with electromagnetic noise, whispered. "Explain," Viereck demanded. Telvatha's secondary eyes flickered as he scanned deeper bands. Heat signatures increasing in subterranean zones. Population movement detected beneath urban centers. Mass transit tunnels, utility corridors, geological shelters. They are retreating underground. Yes, General. Viereck felt a faint tightening in his thoracic cavity. Retreat was expected. Coordinated silence was not. A species divided into hundreds of governments should not have achieved synchronized communication blackout within an hour. Panic should have generated more noise, not less. Instead, Earth grew quiet. On the night side of the planet, cities remained dark. No attempt to restore grids. No obvious counterattack. No desperate planetary broadcast demanding negotiation. Just controlled evacuation patterns and rising industrial heat from below. "They are consolidating," Telvath said softly. "Into what?" Viereck asked. Before Telvath could answer, every display in the chamber flickered. Corthan encryption layers did not flicker. Yet suddenly, a signal forced its way through. Narrow, impossibly focused, riding a carrier frequency that should have been smothered by null fields. The image stabilized. A human, seated at a plain metal desk in a room of undecorated concrete. No visible rank markings. No flags. No trembling. The human looked directly into the recording device. Behind the calm eyes was something Viereck had not yet encountered in this campaign. Not fear. Calculation. "You've knocked out our satellites," the human said in measured tones. The voice was steady, almost conversational. "You've disabled our infrastructure. You've demonstrated technological superiority." A brief pause. The human folded their hands. That was the easy part. Viereck signaled for immediate trace analysis. Nothing. The signal origin shifted microseconds before each triangulation attempt completed. "You're expecting panic," the human continued. "You're expecting us to fracture along our usual fault lines. Nations. Religions. Economies." A faint, humorless smile. "You misunderstand the situation." Viereck leaned closer to the projection. The human's gaze hardened. "General, it's the humans." A fractional pause, just long enough to suggest deliberate restraint. "And we are not pleased." The transmission terminated. All Corthan systems returned to normal operation. Silence filled the command dome. "Trace," Viereck demanded. "Inconclusive," Telvath replied. "Signal multiplexed across thousands of microrelays. Likely prepositioned." "Prepositioned?" Viereck repeated. "Yes, General. Contingency architecture." Viereck turned back to the slowly rotating Earth. In the darkness of its continents, faint thermal blooms pulsed beneath the surface. Factories restarting without drawing from main grids. Transit tunnels glowing with movement. Data centers powered by independent reactors. The humans had not collapsed. They had gone to ground. Not chaotic. Not screaming. Preparing. For the first time since the fleet's arrival, Viereck recalculated. "Revised surrender timeline," he said quietly. Telvath hesitated. "Unknown. Unknown." The word settled heavily. Corthan doctrine defined war as a sequence. Establish orbital supremacy. Sever communications. Neutralize strategic assets. Offer terms. On compliant worlds, the sequence unfolded like clockwork. On Earth, the clock shattered. 3 days after first contact, General Viereck stood before a tactical sphere no longer dominated by neat lines of Corthan control. The planet below had transformed into a shifting mosaic of heat signatures, electromagnetic spikes, and unpredictable bursts of kinetic activity. "They are manufacturing," Telvath reported. "Impossible," Viereck replied automatically. "We disabled their power grids." "You disabled centralized grids," Telvath corrected. "Distributed generation persists. Hydroelectric dams. Small-scale reactors. Combustion turbines. Chemical storage facilities." Viereck watched as dormant industrial zones flared back to life, without reconnecting to national networks. They ran dark, off-grid, shielded from orbital detection by layers of thermal masking that had not existed a week earlier. How? Vierek murmured. Are they coordinating this? Telvath shifted the projection. Fiber optic lines lit up, buried beneath cities. Short-range laser relays blinked between mountaintops. Physical couriers moved through abandoned highways. Encrypted packet bursts rode civilian infrastructure too decentralized to suppress entirely. They anticipated systemic collapse, Telvath said. They rehearsed it. The first major counterstrike occurred outside a human city designated Warsaw. A Korthan landing column, 20 armored walkers and 2 atmospheric gunships, advanced through abandoned streets. No resistance. No visible combatants. Then the ground vanished. Human engineers had undermined kilometers of roadway, converting subway tunnels into shaped collapse chambers. When the Korthan walkers reached the kill zone, synchronized detonations liquefied the supporting soil. 6 walkers fell into the earth. 2 were crushed beneath cascading infrastructure. The rest were pinned as pre-sighted artillery, crude by Korthan standards, hammered their exposed joints. The gunships descended to provide cover. They encountered electromagnetic chaos. Humans had wired entire districts into massive, improvised induction grids. When triggered, the systems discharged pulses tuned, somehow, to Korthan shield harmonics. One gunship spiraled into a high-rise. The other fled orbit-ward, trailing plasma. Vierek reviewed the footage in silence. They sacrificed their own city, a captain observed. Yes, Vierek replied. There was no triumph in his voice. Elsewhere, adaptation accelerated. In coastal waters, Korthan aquatic scouts deployed to secure maritime lanes. They were met not by conventional navies, those had been crippled, but by fishing vessels and cargo ships stripped to skeleton frames and packed with jury-rigged electromagnetic cannons. Human engineers had studied captured drone fragments from early skirmishes. Within weeks, they were fielding sonic disruptors calibrated to interfere with Korthan equilibrium sacs, the delicate organs that maintained balance and spatial orientation. Korthan troops staggered mid-assault, equilibrium collapsing into vertigo as human infantry advanced through smoke and debris. They are not matching our strengths, Telvath observed during a particularly brutal after-action review. No, Vierek agreed. They are targeting our assumptions. Human warfare was inefficient. Losses were heavy. Their equipment failed often. Supply chains snapped and were reknotted with whatever lay at hand. But each failure produced data. And humans learned faster than any model predicted. University laboratories, once devoted to theoretical physics and medical research, shifted overnight into weapons development cells. Civilian drone hobbyists converted racing quadcopters into swarming munitions. Automotive factories stamped out armored plating instead of consumer vehicles. Even their information networks adapted. When Korthan forces deployed psychological operations, projecting images of overwhelming fleet strength, simulating hopeless casualty projections, humans responded by flooding their own networks with footage of resistance victories. A walker collapsing into a subway pit. A Korthan drone torn apart by a swarm of improvised interceptors. A captured Korthan rifle reverse-engineered and firing under human control. Narrative became a weapon, and humans wielded it ruthlessly. The third mistake began as a calculation. Demonstration strike, Vierek ordered during the 4th week. Uninhabited or sparsely populated region. Overwhelming force. Minimal casualties. Maximum psychological impact. The target. A remote desert testing range. Sparse settlements. Strategic irrelevance. A lance of focused orbital energy descended. Sand fused into glass. Shockwaves rippled outward, flattening structures kilometers away. From orbit, it was magnificent. On Earth, it was catastrophe. Casualty estimates were lower than projected for urban zones, but not zero. There were always more humans than expected. Researchers. Nomads. Maintenance crews. Within hours, human networks, those still functioning, broadcast images. A crater wide as a city. Blackened vehicles. Emergency responders digging through vitrified debris. and then a single image that spread faster than any suppression algorithm could contain. A child standing at the edge of the blast zone, holding a piece of cardboard. Handwritten text in multiple languages. You chose the wrong species. Recruitment numbers for human military organizations surged. But more troubling were the secondary effects. Human research timelines compressed. Projects once projected for years reached prototype stage in weeks. Improvised mass drivers appeared in mountainous regions. Rail systems were stripped for conductive material. Decommissioned power plants reactivated to serve as pulse generators. They are accelerating beyond sustainable capacity, a Korthan strategist noted hopefully. They are exceeding sustainable capacity, Telvath corrected. Yet they continue. The Orcs studied the casualty projections. Human losses were staggering. And still they fought. Intelligence gathered from battlefield recoveries began revealing a pattern. Human command was decentralized by design. No single leader orchestrated the resistance. No central node to eliminate. Decisions emerged from overlapping networks, military, civilian, academic, industrial. When one node was destroyed, others compensated. In one region, the elimination of a senior commander resulted not in disarray, but in 5 independent cells executing complementary strategies within hours. How do they maintain cohesion? A captain demanded. Telvath displayed sociological analysis. Shared outrage, he said quietly. The Orc replayed the first transmission in his private chamber that cycle. General, it's the humans. And we are not pleased. He began to understand. Humans did not require centralized authority to unify under threat. They required a common enemy. And the Korthan had provided one. 6 weeks into the campaign, a Korthan research frigate in low orbit transmitted an urgent alert. It had recovered fragments of a downed atmospheric shuttle. Human laboratories were already dissecting its components. They cannot possibly comprehend gravitic phase coils in this timeframe, a senior engineer protested. Perhaps not fully, Telvath said. But partial understanding is sufficient for adaptation. Days later, Korthan ground units reported encountering crude shielding plates capable of partially deflecting directed energy. They worked. A Korthan officer, reviewing helmet footage of a firefight in what had once been an industrial district, muttered in disbelief as human fighters advanced through fire that should have vaporized them. They are evolving mid-conflict, he whispered. The Orc did not correct him. Because the data agreed. Humans were studying Korthan biology, weapon harmonics, shield frequencies in real time. Every skirmish fed their models. Every captured fragment became a stepping stone. War, to the Korthan, was a controlled imposition of superiority. To humans, it was an engine of transformation. By the end of the second month, Earth was no longer a subdued world awaiting integration. It was a forge. And in that forge, something new was being shaped. Harder, sharper, unified by invasion. The Orcs stood once more in the observation dome, staring at the planet below. Fires burned across continents, but so did construction lights. Underground complexes expanding, launch facilities assembling in secrecy. General, Telvath said carefully, projected surrender probability has fallen below measurable thresholds. The Orcs' crest plates lowered. And victory probability? Telvath hesitated. For them, he clarified softly. The Orc did not answer immediately. He watched as a swarm of small objects launched from Earth's surface, too numerous to intercept all at once. Not missiles. Not yet. Satellites. Replacements. Improvised. Redundant. Defiant. The humans were rebuilding their sky under occupation. The Korthan had come expecting collapse. Instead, they had triggered convergence. And for the first time in his long military career, General Vieirek confronted a realization that unsettled even his disciplined mind. This was no longer a suppression campaign. It was becoming a war the humans were learning how to win. Orbit had always meant safety. From orbit, the Korthan Empire had broken civilizations that commanded star-forged fleets. From orbit, they had ended wars before ground forces ever deployed. It was the high ground of the universe, untouchable, immaculate. Earth changed that. It began subtly. Minor collision, reported a navigation officer aboard the cruiser Sovereign Clarity. Debris fragment. No structural compromise. Viereck barely glanced at the notification. Earth's orbital lanes were cluttered long before the Corthan arrived. Thousands of dormant satellites, abandoned rocket stages, fragments of humanity's early attempts at reaching the stars. Primitive clutter. But the next collision was not minor. A Corthan escort frigate suffered shield destabilization after intersecting with a cloud of metallic fragments traveling at improbable velocity. Impacts cascaded across its forward arrays, striking not as random debris, but as a directed pattern. Vector analysis? Viereck demanded. Telvath overlaid trajectories onto the tactical sphere. Thin lines arced upward from multiple points on Earth's surface. They are accelerating debris, he said quietly. Using what? Mass drivers. Repurposed rail infrastructure. Possibly modified industrial accelerators. Viereck watched as new launches spiked across the planet. Dozens at first, then hundreds. Not missiles in the traditional sense. Not clean, elegant weapons. Scrap. Bolts. Shards of decommissioned satellites. Dense tungsten cylinders machined in underground factories. All hurled into orbit at hypersonic speeds, guided not by advanced targeting AIs, but by brute force predictive mathematics and overwhelming volume. Intercept, Viereck ordered. Point defense systems activated. Laser grids stitched across space, vaporizing some incoming fragments. Not all. A storm formed around Earth. Corthan shield harmonics, optimized for directed energy and coherent plasma weapons, struggled against chaotic kinetic saturation. Each impact required recalibration. Each recalibration created micro-windows of vulnerability. They are not trying to destroy us outright, Telvath observed. They are denying stable orbital environment. Viereck understood the implication. Without safe orbit, resupply faltered. Maintenance cycles stretched. Psychological certainty eroded. Orbit was no longer sanctuary. It was exposure. The humans escalated. Commercial launch providers, entities once competing for civilian contracts, now operated in coordinated bursts. Rockets lifted payloads, not of exploration satellites, but of hardened intercept platforms and autonomous guidance clusters. They built constellations faster than the Corthan could suppress them. Destroy launch sites, urged a senior captain. We are attempting to, Telvath replied. They relocate. Mobile platforms. Submarine launches. Concealed silos beneath urban ruins. Humans did not centralize. They distributed. A Corthan battleship, unassailable will, suffered catastrophic damage when a tungsten rod, no larger than a human forearm, punched through its port shield node during recalibration. The impact did not destroy the vessel. It crippled it. Projectile mass? Viereck asked. Minimal, Telvath replied. Velocity compensated. A silence followed. The humans were using physics itself as a weapon. Not elegance. Not superiority. Just relentless application of mass and speed. Then came the boarding. It was dismissed at first as an anomaly. A cluster of small objects approached the outer hull of the Dominion of Silence under heavy debris cover. Thermal signatures were faint, masked by ablative coatings scavenged from mining equipment and atmospheric reentry shields. Intercept, Viereck commanded. Point defense systems eliminated most. 3 survived. They struck the hull with blunt, mechanical force and magnetically locked into place. Surface contact detected. An officer reported. Drilling activity. Viereck's crest plates flared. They cannot penetrate layered Corthan hull alloy. The first breach proved him wrong. The drilling device was crude, rotational, inefficient, but it exploited microfractures created by previous debris impacts. Humans had mapped shield recalibration intervals. They timed their approach to coincide with a harmonic dip. Hull alarms shrieked. Atmosphere vented in a controlled cascade as internal bulkheads sealed. Borders confirmed, Telvath said. Viereck felt something cold settle in his core. No pre-warp civilization had ever placed hostile troops inside a Corthan capital vessel. Internal surveillance feeds activated. Humans emerged from the breach in coordinated teams, armored in composite plating stitched from Corthan fragments and human alloys. Their weapons were hybrid constructions, modified Corthan rifles powered by external battery packs strapped to their backs. The first engagement was brutal. Corthan soldiers were stronger, faster, biologically optimized for combat. In open confrontation, they cut through the initial boarding squad with lethal efficiency. But the humans did not fight for dominance. They fought for disruption. When a corridor became untenable, they collapsed it, detonating shaped charges that warped internal architecture. When flanked, they split into smaller units, navigating maintenance shafts mapped from intercepted schematics. They are not attempting capture, a tactical officer observed. No, Vierek replied. He saw it now. They're sending a message. On Deck 12, a wounded human lay pinned behind shattered bulkhead plating. Corthan troops advanced cautiously. The human glanced at a wrist-mounted device. A final transmission pulse erupted from within the flagship. Across every Corthan vessel in orbit and down to Earth, a signal broadcast simultaneously. Live footage from inside the Dominion of Silence. Corthan corridors. Corthan casualties. Human boots on alien metal. The wounded human triggered the device. An overload charge detonated, venting 3 decks into vacuum. The transmission continued for 3 seconds after decompression began. Long enough. Shock rippled through the fleet. Signal integrity compromised across all vessels, Telvath reported. The broadcast bypassed encryption by piggybacking internal relay nodes. Vierek stood rigid as the final frame froze across Corthan displays. A human-gloved hand gripping the interior of a Corthan hull. Text overlaid in multiple human languages. We can reach you. It was not a threat. It was proof. Morale metrics shifted sharply after that. Corthan crews began requesting reinforced internal patrols. Maintenance schedules doubled. Shield recalibrations grew increasingly cautious, reducing offensive readiness. Humans exploited the hesitation. More debris storms. More unpredictable launches. More small craft darting in and out of detection range, forcing defensive responses disproportionate to their size. They are exhausting us, a captain said during emergency council. They are adapting to us, Telvath corrected. Vierek replayed combat simulations. Human tactics were inefficient. Casualties remained devastatingly high. And yet, their operational effectiveness increased. Every failed boarding attempt yielded telemetry. Every destroyed mass driver refined their next iteration. Their engineers iterated in days what once took them years. They treat loss as data, Telvath murmured. Vierek's gaze returned to Earth. The planet no longer appeared subdued. Launch plumes streaked upward in defiance. Orbital construction frames, rough, asymmetrical, assembled in contested space. Human ships, ugly and angular, began taking shape. They are building warships, a strategist whispered. Yes, Vierek said. Primitive ones. Yes. But primitive no longer meant harmless. The sky over Earth had transformed from Corthan domain into contested territory. And in contest, humans thrived. For the first time in recorded Imperial history, a pre-interstellar civilization had forced the Corthan fleet into defensive posture within its own sphere of control. Vierek felt the weight of realization settle fully. They had not come to conquer a fractured world. They had ignited a unified one. And now, the sky itself was turning against them. By the 6th month, the Corthan fleet still held position above Earth. But it no longer ruled it. The difference was subtle, visible only in the margins of data streams and the posture of officers who no longer stood quite as tall. Shield recalibration cycles consumed increasing power reserves. Debris mitigation required constant microburns. Crew fatigue indices climbed. Every minor anomaly demanded investigation. Every shadow in sensor arrays suggested another improvised human surprise. And beneath it all, Earth continued building. They are expanding subterranean complexes at exponential rates, Telvath reported, projecting layered scans of polar regions. Heat signatures beneath glacial masses exceed industrial norms. Energy source? Vierek asked. Unknown. Likely concealed reactors or experimental systems. Vierek narrowed his primary eyes. The poles had been early casualties of Korthan reconnaissance, remote, resource-poor, strategically negligible. He had dismissed them. Another mistake. The breakthrough came, without warning. At 0400 fleet cycle, gravitational sensors aboard 3 outer picket vessels spiked simultaneously. Localized distortion event, cried a navigation officer. Transient mass displacement. Space folded. Not elegantly, not with the smooth, stable curvature of Korthan gravitic drives, but violently, like fabric twisted by untrained hands. A vessel appeared. It was angular, asymmetrical, visibly armored with patchwork plating. Its drive signature oscillated wildly, as if on the verge of catastrophic failure. But it had translated from low Earth orbit to the outer perimeter of the Korthan formation in a single, impossible blink. Silence flooded the command dome. Identify craft, Vierek ordered. Human origin, Telvath confirmed. Drive architecture, hybridized. Components resemble modified Korthan phase coils integrated with indigenous engineering. The human vessel did not fire. It did not broadcast threats. For 12 seconds, it simply existed among the Korthan fleet. Proof of concept. Then space twisted again, and it vanished, reappearing back near Earth before Korthan weapons could achieve stable lock. They achieved faster-than-light displacement, a captain whispered, disbelief bleeding into the words. Not achieved, Telvath corrected softly. Demonstrated. The distinction chilled the chamber. Humans had taken fragments, salvaged wreckage, battlefield debris, and forced comprehension from it under siege conditions. They are unstable, another officer insisted. The drive signature nearly tore itself apart. Yes, Vierek said. His voice was quiet, but it worked. Panic did not spread through the fleet. Korthan discipline was too ingrained for that. But something deeper shifted. If humans could project beyond their gravity well, however crudely, the war's timeline expanded from planetary suppression to interstellar consequence. They will refine it, Telvath said. They learn at a rate disproportionate to their technological baseline. Vierek considered the projections. If conflict continued, humans would stabilize their drives. They would fortify orbit beyond harassment. They would begin constructing true warships, not improvised ones. And they would remember the desert strike, the shattered cities, the months of orbital domination. Korthan's strategic doctrine contained no precedent for a subjugation campaign that risked birthing a rival power. This was meant to be integration, Vierek murmured. Instead, it had become catalysis. Vierek convened the High War Council. We retain superiority, argued Captain Resch. Orbital tonnage, firepower, experience. For now, Telvath replied. Then escalate, Resch pressed. Planetary sterilization remains viable. Silence fell. Sterilization. The word hung heavy. To annihilate Earth would end the immediate threat. It would also confirm every human narrative of Korthan tyranny and justify any surviving off-world enclaves pursuing vengeance for generations. Vierek turned toward the viewport. Earth rotated slowly, scars visible even from orbit, darkened regions, atmospheric haze from months of conflict. And yet, construction lights glittered across continents. New orbital frameworks extended like metallic vines. Human ships, crude but multiplying, patrolled contested space. They will not stop, Vierek said at last. Then we must ensure they cannot continue, Resch replied. Vierek's crest plates lowered in a gesture few recognized as introspection. No, he said quietly. We must ensure they have no reason to pursue us. The transmission to Earth was not jammed. It was requested. Human networks, fragmented at first contact, now responded with layered encryption and hardened relays. They accepted the channel after verification cycles that would have impressed Korthan intelligence. The image stabilized. The same human from the first broadcast appeared. They looked older. Lines marked their face. Their eyes held exhaustion, but no surrender. Behind them stood others now, military officers, civilian leaders, engineers. Once divided nations stood in unified formation. "General," the humans said evenly. Vierek inclined his head, a gesture of acknowledgement never before offered to an unconquered species. "You have demonstrated resilience beyond projected parameters," he began. A faint flicker crossed the human's expression. "That's one way to phrase it." Vierek did not react. "The Korthan Empire proposes cessation of hostilities, mutual territorial recognition, technology exchange, reparative concessions." The human leaned back slightly. "You invaded our world," they said. "You disabled our infrastructure. You killed our people." "Yes." Vierek did not attempt deflection. "And now," the human asked. "Now we acknowledge," Vierek said carefully, "that conquering humanity would cost more than coexistence." Silence followed. It stretched long enough for Korthan officers to feel the weight of it. Finally, the human spoke. "General," they said softly, almost reminiscent of that first transmission. "It's the humans." A faint, dangerous glint returned to their eyes. "And we are still not pleased." Negotiations were brutal. Humans demanded withdrawal under supervision, reparations in raw materials and medical technologies, shared access to non-military scientific databases, strict monitoring of future Korthan fleet movements within a defined radius of Sol. They negotiated not as a defeated civilization, but as one that had survived initiation. Vierek conceded where necessary. Each concession preserved something greater: distance. When the withdrawal order finally propagated through the fleet, engines flared across Korthan vessels. Formation lines shifted outward, slow and deliberate. Human rail cannons tracked them the entire time. Improvised orbital platforms held firing solutions. The unstable human distortion vessel flickered once, briefly, at the edge of detection range, as if reminding the fleet of its existence. The message was clear: leave. As Earth diminished in the viewport, Telvath stood beside Vierek. "Will they pursue us?" he asked quietly. Vierek studied the shrinking blue sphere. Already, new construction frames gleamed in orbit. Human ships, no longer purely defensive, assembled with unmistakable intent. "Yes," Vierek said at last. "Not today. Not while they rebuild." He watched as Earth's sunlit edge glinted against metallic structures rising like a crown. "But one day, they will come." Telvatha's secondary eyes dimmed. "Should we prepare?" Vierek's gaze remained fixed on the planet. "We already are." Far behind the departing fleet, humanity began its next phase. Not reconstruction alone. Preparation. They archived every battle log, studied every fragment of alien technology, codified the unity born from invasion into doctrine and policy. They had learned what existed beyond their sky. They had learned how quickly peace could vanish. And they had learned something else, something the Korthan Empire would never forget. The most dangerous species in the galaxy was not the oldest, not the strongest,
not the most advanced.
It was the one that adapted under fire, unified under threat, and turned survival into momentum. Across Earth's newly contested orbit, a human admiral watched the last Korthan drive flare fade into distant light. "General," she murmured softly to herself, recalling that first transmission months ago. "It's the humans." Her expression hardened, not with rage, but with resolve. "And next time," she said, "we'll be ready."